I'm Scott Al Miller. It is, I don't even know, Monday night, and this is Nicaragua Live. We're going to take just a minute to get things set up while people are signing in. I actually have, for some reason, everything I have signed out. So nothing's working as I'm used to, and everything's a little bit out of place, and I'm not sure what happened, but I think the stream is working fine, so here we are. Welcome to Nicaragua Live. Tonight we're going to be doing one of those evenings where we go through past questions from the show, because I get comments on the show and I lose track of what is going on. So it is good to do some of these and catch up a little bit. We did this a few days ago, and it worked really well. Janet is already here. Hey, Janet. I am trying to figure out why not everything is signing in here. Just in time for the game, Tony says. Nope, can't figure out. So I can't get my stream comments over here, but that's not a big deal. Just would be nice if I could. It's over so I can see this. There we go. Good enough. Ah, that works. Okay. So I'm going to jump right in and start answering questions. Feel free to leave comments, of course, and give a thumbs up as you join. For anyone who's watching recorded later, give it a thumbs up as you get started. Helps out a lot. We're going to see how many of these we can get through. We're not going to do a 2.5-hour show like we did yesterday by accident. I was thinking that was going to be like 45 minutes. It was not. Oscar Relis for 2563 says, "Hey Scott, thanks for your reply. This is to Nicaragua Q&A AMA Saturday." So this is 2 days ago, same live stream doing these things. We talked a bit about cash and money on there and stuff. He says, "We used to say cash is king. Now we know it's not true due to devaluation through inflation." So that's actually incredibly misleading and very important that we address this. I want to make sure that we and when I do this, it's because I'm letting the person know that we're putting it into the live right at the beginning so they can find it. Janet did say, "I have a word about being called a gringa from a local." Someone said something to Ramon like, "What's up with that gringa you were with?" And Ramon was super offended. Yeah, it depends on the context of how someone uses it, I suppose. You could say that about anything. So the cash is king reference, and this is really important because these things are broadly misused today for selling currency scams and investment scams. So in general, anytime you have one of those phrases, right, like jack of all trades, master of none, right, you forget that so first of all, the original phrase was actually very positive for the jack of all trades, right? They cut off the part that said often better than if you are a master of one. And so the intention of the meaning has been flipped over time. So the idea that these meanings, these little phrases, are good to have is often not true, right? It seems so. There are things that we do, like righty tighty lefty loosey. That is a phrase that actually helps you remember a fact, and you can test it out all the time. Terms like cash is king are a little bit less easy to understand, but we tend to repeat them as if they are truisms rather than just a cool sounding phrase. And so that is difficult when we have to compare them, right? So cash is king. What does that phrase refer to? Let's start. It means when you're doing a purchase, when you're doing a transaction, cash gets you more power, lower price, you're going to outbid someone else or whatever, versus loans, payment plans, IOUs, promises to pay in the future, sheep, and other things. Right, cash is king because it provides the most power during a transaction. That remains true. That has not changed at all. That's not going to change at all. It simply refers to cash in hand and real estate transactions. You see this more acutely because if you're buying a Snickers bar, you're not normally coming in going, can I pay this? Can I get a rain check? Can I, maybe come back and pay you tomorrow? Can I put it on my account? Probably not. But when you're buying a house, quite often you're coming in and you're like, well, my bank's going to give me some money. I'm going to borrow some from my parents. I'm going to this, I'm going to that. And the bank is like, I really hope this works out. Whereas if you come in with cash and you're like, I'm going to give you this cash for this transaction, you're going to win at the same amount of money. You move faster, the money's guaranteed, there's no worries, and so forth. Cash is king. That has never been more true, but it's always been so true that it's hard to really say it's more true. It's so true. He says it's not true due to devaluation through inflation. Inflation does not affect transactions. So that is clearly not correct. That requires a dramatic misunderstanding of what that phrase is, which highlights the danger of phrases like that, is that if you need a phrase like that to be aware that cash is better than a loan for having power in a transaction, then you're not in a position to know what the phrase really means, to understand it deeply, which means you are ripe for those things being used as trickery. And so inflation has no impact here, right? None at all. So that is very bad. That implies someone was actually holding cash, which no one has ever honestly told anyone to hoard cash as a wealth store. That's insane, right? That's everything uses that as the example of how dumb can you be, right? Putting cash in the mattress, we say, right? Which is a very American thing. I don't know why anyone would put cash in a mattress. That seems crazy because you know what burns? Cash. You know what else burns? Mattresses. I don't want to put those together. And mattresses burn really, really hot and toxically. So if you do have a fire and you can get to your cash, you may still not be able to get to it because it's in that big flaming toxic mattress. Of all places in your house, that's a pretty bad place to put it. But that's the example Americans always use, is putting cash in your mattress. Maybe people did that because it's such a dumb place to put it that thieves just won't look there. I do not know. But that's how much we don't mean cash is king, because people who traditionally would say cash is king never put money in your mattress, right? Put your money to work for you. So storing money and transacting money are two extremely different things, right? But today, especially with cryptocurrency, we're seeing a big push towards intentionally conflating these two ideas to create a new gap of basic transactional financial knowledge that is being used to hoodwink people. So this is a danger that could come up. And what we see, for example, in the cryptocurrency space, we're not here to talk about crypto, we're here to talk about this particular comment, but in El Salvador, right, they did two wholly unrelated moves with cryptocurrency. One was to try to use it as a transaction medium to make it the cash. And it wasn't to replace cash, it was to be the cash, right? It was still cash. The other was to use it as a wealth store, where they're actually holding hoards of it for the government to use, not for transactions and not for the people. Unrelated things. The cash one failed utterly. The other didn't do great, but it's okay. And they're still using it, but it's expected to do badly. But it might not, it might do well. We don't know. It's still ongoing. But this one failed and is gone. But remember, they're unrelated. The thing is that because this one failed, and because a lot of people are trying to sell the product, they'll point to this one and pretend it's this one. And they'll intentionally conflate, not deflate or inflate, but conflate the concepts of your transaction currency with wealth stores in order to try to, as whatever there is, to sell the thing they're trying to sell. So watch for this in any conversation. But cash certainly is king more than ever, or at least as much as ever. He says, please don't stash cash. Good. So he is thinking in the right way, just not realizing that that was not what the advice was, right? So he's saying the right thing. He's just using this phrase incorrectly. It never meant what he thought it meant. He said, buy some gold. Now keep in mind that one, a lot of people want gold-backed currencies, making gold cash, literally the same thing. Two, when you're using gold as transaction, it becomes cash, regardless of whether you're gold backing your currency or using gold directly. Gold is cash, and gold traditionally deflates, it goes through inflation. typically. Now, at the moment, it has deflated mostly because of the inflation of competing currencies. So it's very hard to tell how well gold is doing because so many other things are doing so poorly. It may just be making gold look good rather than being good, but we'll give it the benefit of the doubt that at the moment, gold is doing quite well. That is an unlikely scenario. Historically, gold is and I mean this, the worst store of money, of wealth, we've ever found. Let that sink in. It's the worst, short of actual cash, right? Traditional currencies, fiat currencies that have protections to keep them from deflating. Gold can deflate at some times, which if you were using it as a wealth store, you would want it to do. But if you are using it as a transaction currency, you don't want it to do. So gold is a very bad transaction currency and a quite bad, but not quite as bad as a fiat currency wealth store. These are the two worst possible wealth stores, right? The cash in a mattress and what is basically gold in a mattress, gold being a different type of cash that has a little bit of hedge built into it. Gold instead that is durable and decentralized. So cash is decentralized for the most part, not quite as much as gold, but gold is controlled by government, so it is centralized. That's actually a really big problem with it. And he says it's durable. Actually, the non-durability of gold is one of its biggest problems. If you're talking about a house fire, gold is quite durable. If you're talking about its ability to move over borders or to survive conflicts or economic collapse, gold is exceptionally non-durable because countries often restrict the movement of gold at the hard point, right? The reason that gold is so popular and it goes into the psyche is because during World War II, when women still were broadly not allowed to have bank accounts, jewelry made often of gold was their wealth store in the way that they could move some amount of money. But if you ever want to see what a bad thing that was, it was all they had. So it is what it is. But it was because they were simply discriminated against. But if you watch the famous movie Casablanca, people are trying to sell gold in order to escape Nazi Germany, and they were losing 80% or so of their wealth store because no one was giving them any. Gold becomes worthless during a conflict, right? So yes, right now, because there isn't a major conflict, there's a lot of conflicts, but there aren't major ones that are impacting currency. Gold is very high, but should the U.S., for example, go to large-scale war, we expect the value of gold to become almost nothing. And all those wealth stores that are in gold will evaporate, as they have always done in the past. And because you can't pick up your gold store and move to another country, unless you have just a tiny bit. You're like, I got $500, I keep it in gold. Weird, but okay. There are many jurisdictions where gold is not allowed to move. There are many jurisdictions where gold is allowed to move, but only at high taxation rate, even if it's a small amount. And if you try to move more gold than $10,000, there is essentially no jurisdiction in the world that allows you to do that. If you try to do it without declaring it, they have the right, generally, to seize all of your assets, not just the gold. And so it's a very, 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 very dangerous thing. We can't, it's not humanly possible to overstate the dangers of gold hoarding, because it always sounds good, but when reality hits, there's never been a time when hoarding gold was a good idea, because when you need it, it's not worth anything. And when you need to go, you can't move it. So it's so not durable. It is so controlled by central parties compared to other things. He says it's easy for the common person. It's absolutely beyond a common person to even begin to comprehend. Every post about gold is exactly why you can't have gold for normal people. Gold requires expertise. It requires expertise to protect, to move, to buy and sell without losing things, right? It is so dangerous, especially for normal people. Obviously, do stock trading if you're familiar. So trading is different than investing, right? So this is getting into very different things. Like on one side, we're talking about how do you do cash transactions, like purchasing things. Then he's jumping to wealth stores. Then he's talking to trading, like moving things in. And like these are very unrelated things that happen to use some of the same mechanisms, kind of like buying cars and playing poker, like what's the relationship? In both cases, you use money to do it. Okay, but this is jumping all over. And have training as you can do that as a nomad. However, it's gambling. Stock trading, let's be real clear. Stock trading is nowhere close to the level of gambling as hoarding gold. All things, right? When we get into finance, you can lump all things into some type of investment or trading. And when you do that, all things are gambling, right? Hoarding something, gambling. Like coming from a Wall Street background, we always say, what is the most risky? Now obviously holding gold or cash would be more risky. No one considers that viable. No one considers holding a savings account viable, right? Those things are just jokes. Like we obviously setting your money actually on fire to stay warm ruins your wealth. We understand that. Of things that people actually might fall for, the number one least conservative, most reckless, most wildly gambling, crazy thing you can do is bonds. Because normal bonds are not expected to keep up with inflation, right? When you buy bonds, you're betting that governments or whoever is the bond issuer is going to remain stable at a time when the rest of the world is not. That's not, I'm gambling on a company. That's not, I'm gambling against the market. That is, I'm gambling on this company against the market under the most extreme circumstances possible. And it's not just when one does this, the other does this. This is an almost guaranteed both will fail together and that there will be nothing left. And under that circumstance where we expect that to happen, somehow this one will remain and honor the bond, right? Because after all that, there still has to be, without the power to enforce it, a desire for that company to honor a bond. It's a little bit odd. Gambling, if you know what you're doing. Sadly, Australia just had a mass shooting in Bondi Beach that we were talking about last night. So it's really important with all of these kinds of things to really understand what we're talking about, trading versus investing, wealth stores versus cash transactions, and so forth, and not mix them together, not conflate them, because that is very easy to do and very, very dangerous to do. And importantly, when you're thinking about how these things function under circumstances where everything is working fine, when everything falls apart, then hold on, finding out. It's not just, I think this stock will do well, or this stock will weather a war or an economic collapse. It's also that I expect the market and the mechanisms and all the things that go with it that will make this still viable also survive under the circumstances where many other things have collapsed, right? So that's a very wild moment, right? So gold has some ability to weather that, but not very good. Currency might weather that, but not very good. There aren't super easy answers. And something that people will sometimes point out, no, not in this case, he did not mention this, but some people are like, well, I want to get an ETF, or EFT, that's how I'm going to protect my gold, right? If I have the gold myself, the government might seize it, or my neighbor might seize it, or my house could be robbed, or the bank could fail and they won't give it to me, or there's a huge fire and it melts into a blob underground, whatever. And so people recognize that physically having gold is crazy risky. So then they're like, well, I'm going to put it into this foreign account. So I'm going to hold what is basically a bond for that gold. Well, now you just issued your own non-government backed gold-backed currency, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also wild. You just converted gold into cash. Now you're back to cash. You have paper cash that is, yes, registered in your name. So hopefully there's some protection there, even if that cash catches on fire or something. So that's a little bit of protection. But in the case of major economic collapse, well, will that EFT still be there? Still honor your paperwork? Will it be seized? Who knows? Will the records be kept? There's all these, oh, wait, there's still so much to go wrong in those cases. So it's very important to think about what it is you're trying to protect against, not just say, if certain things, people have a tendency to think if the market collapses, they forget that governments might be a government collapsing might be what causes that market to collapse. They may not think about how other things are going to play out in the market under those conditions, what the world will be like. I once did risk analysis with a bank who was deciding to whether or not to build a third data center in Singapore based on the threat of nuclear war against Singapore. And eventually they decided to build the third data center, and their logic was if both sides of Singapore were hit by nuclear blast, they wanted to be able to keep trading in the region. I'm sorry, they didn't build a third one in Singapore. They built a third one in the region because Singapore would not survive more than 2 strikes. And my question for the analysis that I think was really missed was, what is the possible condition under which there have been 2 nuclear strikes on Singapore and they're still trading in the region? Any trading anywhere in the region, right? Because their belief was that the Hong Kong exchange would remain open and that we'd want to be trading on it under those conditions. And maybe they were right, but it's a question I didn't hear people asking, right? Like, okay, yes, Singapore gets wiped off. That's a 1 in 1,000 chance. But now the chance that Hong Kong will not be impacted by any nuclear attack, but will keep the stock market open while Singapore has just flashed over the horizon is just quite a jump. I don't know how long I get to be here on the live stream. I was expecting to go for a while. I had everything set up, and then suddenly my wife just surprised me with I have to drive people home, so I'm going to find out in a minute what's going on. Yeah, so that's going to be a quick one. I did not mean to this be one topic, one shot thing. I'm going to read through the comments real quick. The gringo thing, his friend agreed that someone calling me a gringo is disrespectful. Sean Heineman says, to bring money into the country, is it the same as the US and Canada, under $10,000? How do you bring enough money to purchase stuff? Yes, I don't know any country that isn't the same. I'm wrapping up. I'm doing what I can. I don't know any country that isn't using that limit. There are some that don't, but I don't know of them. Essentially everybody. Assume if you're a traveler, it will always be $10,000 US value, and that includes gold, silver, diamonds, whatever assets could be readily traded counts as cash. And it's the International Money Laundering Agreement. Most countries in the world, and I mean nearly all, are party to the same international money laundering controls limit, and that number was set at $10,000 USD. So Costa Rica, Guatemala, Mexico, US, Canada, you name it, they're all going to be the same, and it's very specifically the same money and the same rules, basically, which is they can just seize it. The thing we always say is, why would anyone travel with that much money? And then his further question is, how do you bring enough money to purchase stuff? You don't bring money with you anywhere in the world ever, except the most extreme circumstances. For example, during the brief period where Argentina had a currency collapse, it was the banks had failed and the ATMs had failed, and the only way to get money was to have cash with you. That was a unique example that was just temporary in a safe country. Under normal circumstances, you should never let it cross your mind that you would be traveling with large amounts of currency anywhere. If that comes up, there's a misunderstanding as to where you source money. Right? It is so dangerous and so impractical. And I've lived all across Europe. I've lived across Latin America. I work all over Latin America. I have offices in Portugal. I've been to Africa, do stuff in Asia. Absolutely, nowhere have I ever experienced a situation where it would ever come up that you would want to do that. You certainly would not do that here, right? If you're doing things here, everything here is normal, right? So how do you get money somewhere in the US or Canada? You have your bank send the money, right? Small amounts of money, you go to the ATM and take it out. Large amounts of money, your bank does a bank transfer. Same things here, no real difference. But the one thing you don't do, whether it's, if you're going to buy a car in the US or Canada, you would never go get wads of cash and drive somewhere. Can you? Most places will let you. Would it blow their minds? Absolutely, right? Same thing here. You're not going to pay for a house with cash. Just way too dangerous. You want all those things in bank records. Citizen's Quest. Would you ever consider living in El Salvador? It seems pretty similar but safer. No, I don't think so. It is. We don't really believe the safer thing. And most importantly, arbitrary arrest is very high. I've been there. I've seen arbitrary arrest attempted I think El Salvador's got a lot of good stuff going for it, but it's not really competitive with Nicaragua in a lot of things. Good compared to a lot of stuff, but just having low violent crime is and only momentarily. Not a big selling point, right? Obviously, safety is a big deal, but it's very momentary safety. So we don't know if that's going to be maintained. Nicaragua, on the other hand, extremely safe always, right? Really, really long time. So that's very different, right? So El Salvador, I really want to visit. I have visited. I really want to go visit more. I want to do tons of exploration. I think it's a great country, wonderful people. Is it a place I would avoid living? No. But am I going to put it on the same level as a Nicaragua or a Panama or Guatemala or Mexico? I don't think it's there yet. Does it have the potential to get there? Yes, it does. It needs to get a track record more than anything. But right now, its arbitrary arrest record is worrisome. I'm not blaming them for it. I understand the reasons that has to happen potentially, but that does keep a certain level of, I have traveled there with friends, I've had military pull innocent people out of buses, and only because as an American I was able to intervene did they not have major problems. That makes it a little bit safer for me, but I don't feel comfortable in a place where my friends could be arrested just for being my friends. And that was before the major arbitrary incarceration things going on, where people can pay to have you incarcerated, which is now a real fear, right? So Salvador is definitely a place that we're watching, and they're working hard with Nicaragua, and potentially they're going to fix things, and maybe there's just been a few mistakes. So we're really hopeful, right? I don't want to be down on El Salvador, and I want to go there, and they're very close, and I'm so excited that we have the ferry between us now. But it does not make, for those reasons at this time, my short list. I think Bukele's doing great stuff. I think he's got a lot of potential, but we got to see where it goes, right? Like, things just take time. Too many really awesome options nearby where I'm not in a position of rolling the dice really heavily on stuff. Hey, Scott from Western Washington. What's up, Uncle Scott? Hey, Joseph. Hi, Scott. Skip my comments. Oh, sorry, Expazaz. All right, guys. We almost got to 30 minutes. It's not terrible. Sorry that it's a short one. I thought we were going to go through a lot of questions this week, or today. We'll do them pretty soon. And with that, I got to go drive people home because I'm the only person with a driver's license. I will see all of you tomorrow.